Hey, it's Melissa at Twin Oaks Family Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA. Thanks for joining us on our YouTube channel, Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. It is our pleasure to be able to bring you into our meat bird production barn and show you how chicken is produced. We are currently raising a flock of broilers that we have been able to do a video a day on from start to present, and will continue from present to finish. So you really get to see one way that chicken is successfully produced from raising Cornish rock cross meat chickens. So these chickens really are specialized to be broilers, meaning birds that are produced specifically for meat, birds that are raised specifically for meat production. And they are suitable for that. In fact, they're top shelf for that because they convert feed to meat so rapidly that they can be ready for slaughtering and processing into whole chickens and specialty cuts of poultry within 5 or 6 weeks, actually. So in this video today, Broilers Day 41, we are going to summarize our target feed consumption range and our target feed consumption rate, how we arrive at those numbers and how we apply them to a flock, and going to tell you how this flock finished up on that. It's kind of interesting because we kind of had this underlying sense that this flock was finishing ahead of schedule, overeating, eating a little bit ahead of the rate that we expected, and then we kind of finally realized we double checked our calendars, kind of got back to looking more closely at dates and at number of days, and we realized we were looking at the wrong data point all along. And actually this flock, it did finish ahead of schedule in terms of number of days, because we generally expect to need about 42 days to take our birds from hatch to ready to harvest. And this flock really, we really saw readiness 38, 39 days. And it doesn't hurt to have more days for them to fill out and gain some more size. But in that regard, they did finish a little bit ahead. However, they weren't really ahead of feed consumption. We figured out that we were looking at the wrong data point. So we'll kind of wrap up with that toward the end of the video. But thanks for joining us, and please subscribe if you haven't. And we really get these videos out there to get awareness to people that real chicken only comes from real chickens. And in addition to that awareness, we as a family, as a household here, we have an initiative that we came up with called Heart Local Ag. And basically it just means that we encourage people to support local agriculture wherever local is for you. And the best way we can support local agriculture is by sourcing our food as close to home as we possibly can. And that could mean that you raise and produce food as locally as you can get, right at your home place or right in your own backyard, if where you live and your season of life all works in tandem with that and supports that. But if that's not the case and you source your food from beyond your home place, we just want to encourage people to look local first. And we guarantee you, if you look local and you find producers, you can access and source wholesome and nutritious food locally. So we encourage you just to look local and heart local ag, support local ag. There's a lot of ways you can do that. We will get back to the birds, but a few ways that you can do that. You actually could go to farmers markets and meet producers there and ask them if they know other producers in the area that grow and raise the things that you're looking for. You also could reach out to an agriculture extension service that is part of a state university and ask them for resources. You could reach out to a local high school and inquire about their FFA program or their vocational agriculture education program and see if some of even those young people may be in production agriculture operations and have food available for consumers, or they'll definitely know people that do. Another way, if you get your food from the grocery store, that doesn't mean you can't find local food. A lot of local grocers have local produce, local dairy, maybe even local meat right there in their store. So it just takes asking maybe the owner of the grocery store if they offer any local foods. I know at our local grocery store, there's potatoes there, milk there, apples, apple cider, eggs, all things produced locally, so that they take the time to source, from local producers. So you can shop at your grocery store and still support local agriculture. So heart local ag, wherever local is for you. But let's take a look at the flock, and let's get caught up on that target feed consumption range and rate and how this flock finished. So target feed consumption rate just means we expect the chickens to eat 10 pounds of feed per bird from hatch to harvest. So we expect to be able to finish a meat chicken on 10 pounds of feed. So when we plan a flock, we just figure out how many birds we want to raise in that flock at the time, and we multiply that number by 10, and that tells us how many pounds of feed we ought to be able to raise that flock on. So typically, we'll go ahead and order that much feed from a local feed mill here in our area, and they actually we ask them to get a commercially prepared complete feed. They handle it anyway, but we will turn in to them how much of that we want, and they can get it from the feed producer and have it available for us at the local feed mill. So we find out how many pounds of feed we need. We have that on hand here, and we plan that for the flock. So for this flock, we ordered 300 chicks, so we planned on needing 3,000 pounds of feed to finish them, and that should work on a time frame of 5 to 6 weeks without any problem. If you want to raise the birds longer than 6 weeks, that's going to start to skew that target feed consumption range. But we know that we can finish the birds in 5 or 6 weeks on 10 pounds per bird. So 3,000 pounds should have finished this flock. And here we are with this flock on day 41. And at 6 a.m. on day 41, my husband and I fed the last 100 pounds of feed that we had allotted for this flock. We fed it out in their feeders this morning. So had this flock been going to day 42, which is the production cycle we prefer, that would have worked out perfect, because we would have put that feed in this morning at 6 a.m. and basically by now it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, and you can see an empty feeder tray there. That's representative of all the feeders in the pen. They're all like that. So they would have cleaned up that feed, and now this is when we would take those feeders out and start feed withdrawal, because that needs to be done about 12 to 18 hours before the birds are processed. So that 100 pounds we put in today actually concluded 3,050 pounds that we have fed to what is now a flock of 296 meat chickens. So we were right on target, and they are finished. They're ready to be processed. So we were right on target with our target feed consumption range, the range that this amount of birds needed about 3,000 pounds to go from hatch to harvest. So to get our target feed consumption rate, in other words, how quickly are we going to feed that out, what ends up happening is the first week the birds get free choice feed as much as they want, and this group consumed about 50 pounds every 3 days. At the end of a week, we usually see an increase in appetite, and so this group actually went from 50 pounds every 3 days to 50 pounds a day starting at the end of a week old, and that lasted, I think, until about 3 weeks old, and then we see another jump in appetite. So when we see the second jump in appetite, at that point, that's when we really set our target feed consumption rate, because we'll look at, okay, how many pounds of feed do we have left, how many days of production do we have left, and we do some division, and that tells us how many pounds of feed a day that flock can have. So at about 3 weeks old, we determined, based on the feed we had left and thinking of going out 42 days, we determined this flock can have 100 pounds of feed a day. And so as a week or so went on, we got to thinking, it seems like this flock, we've fed 200 pounds more than we should have. And it feels like they're about 200 pounds ahead on feed consumption on the rate of feed, at the rate they're eating it at. So then, as we got into week 4 and and close to week 5, we started thinking about the production days and started double checking our calendar, and that's when we kind of realized the production date is October 6th, while their hatch date was August 23rd. So that means this flock goes out to 45 days of production. And so that's where that difference in the rate they were eating at and how much they're eating came into play. So we realized that actually our target feed consumption range and our target feed consumption rate were right on for our 42-day production cycle. But since these birds have to go out to 45 days, it is going to take a little more feed. So as I told you, we did feed the very last of our feed that we had planned ahead for them the morning of day 41. So we actually got from our local feed mill just cracked corn. So we brought home 250 pounds of cracked corn. That's what's in those bags here on day 41. So on day 42, we'll feed 100 pounds of that. On day 43, we'll feed 100 pounds of that. And on day 44, we'll feed 50 pounds of that. And hopefully then that'll finish up on the right timing, because then partway through day 44 we would start feed withdrawal and pull feeders. So if that 250 pounds of cracked corn gets us to the morning of day 44, we'll be in good shape. But we've had to be more management intensive about that target feed consumption rate and range with this flock than we've had to be with any other Cornish rock cross meat chickens that we've raised. But we did that to keep them on that feed schedule of finishing them on about 10 pounds a piece. And so it'll be a little more, because we are going to feed actually an extra. It'll end up, we've got 250 pounds there, and we had already fed 50 pounds extra. So they'll actually eat 3,300 pounds of feed to raise them from start to finish. And we do change them over to cracked corn at the end. They have been eating a complete prepared feed that's commercially prepared, and so it's designed to have the protein level, the right balance of minerals and vitamins that growing meat birds need. The 22% protein is what we started with. You can feed that to meat birds start to finish. We did reduce to a 19% meat bird poultry feed, and what we end up doing is the last few days before processing, we actually stop feeding the prepared feed, the complete feed, and we change to just cracked corn. We want just a single ingredient going into our birds the last few days before production. And the main reason for that is because the feed that we use throughout production has an additive in it called amprolium, and that is for managing the potential of coccidia or coccidosis, which is caused by coccidia, which is a protozoa that is found in most soils, and it affects most species of livestock, most species of animals, and it actually can cause intestinal inflammation, but it will lead to sickliness and death throughout the flock if it's not managed for, and if it causes the flock a problem. So the fact is, most livestock is exposed to it. A lot of livestock will kind of clear it on its own and not have a problem. But if we have the misfortune of a flock that doesn't clear it on its own, and it runs rampant through the flock because they were all exposed to a protozoa in the soil, then we could have widespread mortality and flock loss prior to processing throughout the flock. So with amprolium being in the feed to manage for coccidosis, there's no requirement to take the amprolium out of their diet before processing, but we prefer to take the amprolium out of their diet before processing. So the way that we choose to handle that is we just stop feeding the feed that has amprolium in it as an ingredient, and we switch to feeding cracked corn, which we know just by visual observation and the integrity of the product, looking at it, we know that it doesn't have anything added to it, and we know we have withdrawn the amprolium, and then we withdraw feedstuffs altogether, including the corn, at the appropriate time, and we feel our birds are well prepared for processing. So that's why we switch off to cracked corn at the end, and it also gives a nice finish to the meat for meat production. So thanks for joining us, y'all. Join us again on day 42. We appreciate ya.